We're staying in New York all this week, investigating some disturbing things that, honestly, you'll probably regret knowing. Today's stories all have real CCTV and security camera footage to drive home the dark reality that we are already living in. Anyway, it's time to dive back into the Big Apple. Love ya.
The tenant of the apartment, he came in, he never came out.
It feels like the devil just crawled through here.
In the early hours of March 5th, 2024, the 6th floor of 979 Summit Avenue in the Bronx was quiet enough for every sound to travel. At around 1 in the morning, a woman in the building heard 2 gunshots coming from apartment 6G. Then came a man's voice, desperate and clear through the walls. "Please don't, I have a family." A brief pause followed, then 2 more shots. The man inside the apartment was 44-year-old Colin Small. He had grown up in Harlem and had known 48-year-old Sheldon Johnson for years. Their friendship stretched back to childhood, and both men had later spent time in prison, including at Sing Sing. After Johnson was released, Colin's family said he had tried to help his old friend get back on his feet. That made what happened inside the apartment almost impossible to understand. At around 10 o'clock the previous night, Building Superintendent Orlando Medina had seen Colin return home alone. CCTV showed him entering his 6th floor apartment. Nothing strange about that. But during the hours that followed, the same cameras began recording a bizarre sequence of movements in the hallway. A man repeatedly entered and left Colin's apartment. Each time, something about him seemed to change. Sometimes he wore a hat. At another point, he appeared in a blonde wig. He used sunglasses, a mask, and different sets of clothing. In one of the most unsettling moments captured by the cameras, he appeared to leave wearing the same clothes Colin had been wearing when he arrived home. The disguises did not make him disappear. They only made the footage more suspicious. The man also carried items in and out, rubbish bags, cleaning products and containers. At one stage, the cameras recorded him returning with a large blue bin. To anyone casually watching, it might have looked like somebody moving household items. But Medina already knew something was wrong. A resident had told him about the gunshots and the pleading voice. More importantly, Colin had entered his apartment and had not been seen leaving it. The man on the CCTV, however, kept coming and going. Medina reviewed the footage and became increasingly concerned. He recognized the visitor as someone he had seen with Colin before. But the changing outfit, cleaning supplies and blue container suggested that whatever was happening inside apartment 6G was not normal. At around 11:30 that morning, Medina called 911 and requested a wellness check. Officers arrived at approximately 8:25 that evening. When they reached Colin's apartment, Sheldon Johnson was there. Johnson reportedly claimed Colin had gone upstate, but the security footage told a different story. It showed Colin entering alone the previous evening. It showed Johnson moving through the building repeatedly after the sounds of gunfire, and it did not show Colin leaving. Police detained Johnson and searched the apartment. Inside, they found the large blue bin and plastic containers. What had looked semi-ordinary on the CCTV was now at the center of a horrifying discovery. Remains were found inside, including Colin's torso and feet. The search then expanded beyond the Bronx. Investigators connected Johnson to an apartment on 5th Avenue in Harlem, and there, inside a freezer, more of Colin's remains were discovered, including his head and limbs. Police also found Colin's vehicle near Johnson's home. Inside were hacksaw blades, while other items linked to the investigation reportedly included concrete and a protective Tyvek suit. The CCTV footage had captured almost every stage of the alleged attempt to conceal what happened. It showed the disguises. It showed the cleaning supplies. It showed the bags and containers. It showed one man leaving the apartment again and again. The case became even more shocking because of who Sheldon Johnson appeared to have become. Johnson had spent roughly 25 years in prison after receiving a lengthy sentence for attempted murder and robbery. During his incarceration, he said he had left gang life behind. earned his GED, completed college courses, and helped create rehabilitation programs. After his release in 2023, he worked with Queen's Defenders and spoke publicly about rehabilitation and helping young people avoid his mistakes. On February 1st, 2024, just over a month before Colin's death, Johnson appeared on The Joe Rogan Experience. Sitting in the studio, he described the moment he had supposedly decided to change his life. He spoke about his family, his children, and the reputation he no longer wanted to carry. "I've been doing bad for so long," he said. "I'm going to try to do something good." The appearance presented Johnson as an example of rehabilitation, a former gang member who had survived decades in prison and returned to society determined to help others. One of the people appearing alongside him described him as a miracle. Then, only weeks later, cameras recorded him doing what he did. Investigators considered several possible motives. Colin's relatives said the men had been arguing over money. Police also found a kilo press inside the apartment, raising the possibility that illicit substances or unpaid debts played a role. There were also reports of an old dispute connected to their years in prison. Johnson was arrested and charged with offences including murder, robbery, burglary, weapon possession, evidence tampering, and concealment of a human body. He pleaded not guilty and shouted, "I'm innocent," as reporters watched him being led away in handcuffs. There was so much potential to be an inspiration here, to be a success story, but this rehabilitation really couldn't have gone much worse.
The neck was almost as fat as my face. My nose is broken. Here, you can see the swollenness here.
On the evening of September 13th, 2024, 81-year-old Gula Freeman stepped outside her Upper West Side apartment to walk her son's golden doodle. It was around 7 o'clock, still early enough for the pavements near West 66th Street and Amsterdam Avenue to be busy. Freeman had lived in the neighborhood since 2007. She regularly visited Lincoln Center and knew the streets well. There was no reason to believe this short dog walk would be any different from the hundreds she had taken before. As Freeman stood beside the building with the dog, a man in a black t-shirt walked past her. There was no argument. They did not appear to exchange words or even acknowledge one another. He simply continued along the pavement. Then he stopped. The security camera watching the street captured the man turning around and walking back towards Freeman. She remained unaware of him as he approached from behind. Within seconds, he pulled back his arm and struck the side of her face with enough force to send her into the wall of the building. Freeman immediately collapsed onto the pavement. The dog remained beside her as she lay unconscious. A passerby turned around and moved towards her. A nearby doorman and other witnesses rushed over to help. The attacker, meanwhile, did something almost as strange as the assault itself. After walking away from the woman he had just knocked unconscious, he reportedly flagged down a doorman and told him to call an ambulance. Then he left. When Freeman regained consciousness, the attack had vanished from her memory. She could not remember the man walking past her. She could not remember the punch, hitting the building or collapsing onto the pavement. Her first clear memory was of sitting inside her sister's apartment. The sisters lived in the same building. Freeman had bruising across her face and body, a fractured nose, a concussion and pain in her neck and head. Her face throbbed, and she suffered from a severe headache. Doctors told her she had lost consciousness, and that the impact could easily have killed her. Yet the most disturbing part for Freeman was the complete blank space in her mind. "I have total amnesia," she said. 100%, not even a little bit. She only understood what happened because other people described it to her and because the surveillance camera had recorded it. She was left examining the injuries on her own face as evidence of an experience she could not remember. Had the man tried to steal her bag or take something from her, Freeman believed the attack might at least have had a recognizable motive. Instead, he appeared to have chosen her for no reason at all. He had walked past, changed his mind, and returned to strike an elderly stranger. "It was a random act of craziness," Freeman said. "I happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time." The violence was especially alarming because Freeman was not the only elderly woman attacked in the neighborhood that day. Several hours earlier, at around 2 in the afternoon, a 77-year-old woman had been walking along West 72nd Street, close to Columbus Avenue, when another man approached and punched her in the left eye. She suffered minor injuries and did not require hospital treatment. The attacker fled west along 72nd Street. Police believe the assaults were unrelated, but the similarities were impossible for local residents to ignore. 2 elderly women attacked without warning, only a few streets and several hours apart. Some people living nearby began looking over their shoulders. One resident said she no longer felt comfortable going out alone. Another worried about his 2 teenage daughters, who regularly walked through the same area. Freeman refused to allow the fear to control her life, although her habits changed. She began paying closer attention to anyone approaching her and kept her distance from people who appeared unpredictable. For a time, she avoided traveling on the subway, where crowded carriages could leave her with nowhere to move. But she remained remarkably compassionate towards the man who had attacked her. Rather than demanding revenge, Freeman said she hoped he would receive psychiatric help. She believed somebody willing to attack a stranger without motive must have been deeply unwell. Almost a month after the assault, police arrested 37-year-old Staten Island resident Hansel Esparragoza. He was charged with second-degree assault in connection with the attack captured on camera. Freeman said she was relieved that he was no longer on the street, but she still hoped his arrest would lead to treatment rather than simply punishment. The footage had preserved the moments her mind could not. What she chose to remember instead was that she had survived. "People ask me why I'm in a good mood," she said. "I'm in a good mood because I'm alive and I can tell my story." For Gula Freeman, September 13th became more than the night a stranger attacked her. It became the day she was given what she described as a second lease on life. Just a quick one. For some reason, my videos are normally seen by just 1 to 2% of my subscribers. I actually don't know why. Regardless of the reasons, it's making it extremely challenging to keep this show on the road. And I promise I don't like to do this. It makes me feel like Oliver Twist or something. But please do consider becoming a channel member. There are currently 343 of you, and I'm aiming for the crazy goal of 1,000 by the end of 2026. You get things like early access to videos, our behind-the-scenes podcast, and of course my eternal gratitude. Thank you, and I love you all. Now, back to the video. In May 2025, security cameras across New York City began capturing something strange. In the middle of the night, groups of people were lifting manhole covers and disappearing beneath the streets. The first known sighting came on May 5th in Astoria, Queens. At around 2 in the morning, 3 people wearing waterproof hip waders and protective clothing approached a manhole near 20th Avenue and 36th Street. Footage from a nearby business showed them carrying flashlights as they pried open the heavy cover. One by one, they climbed down into the darkness. The final person pulled the cover shut behind them, leaving no sign they had ever been there. Aki Jakupovic, whose surveillance cameras recorded the scene, watched the group from nearby. 3 random guys walking around in a strange suit, open the sewer, go in like Ninja Turtles, he later said. The men looked back at him before vanishing underground. Several weeks later, it happened again. At around 11 o'clock on the night of May 28th, 8 people removed a manhole cover on McDonald Avenue in Brooklyn. They descended into the sewer and remained below the city for approximately 3 hours. Shortly after 2 in the morning, the cover moved. One person climbed out, followed by another and then another. Soon, the entire group was standing beside the road in wet protective clothing. Several parked cars appeared to be waiting for them. The group immediately began changing into clean clothes before throwing their dirty equipment into the vehicles and driving away. Just hours later, another camera recorded a similar scene in Williamsburg. Around 7 or 8 people emerged from a manhole in the middle of an intersection. Some wore headlamps. Others carried what appeared to be shovels and tools. Cars continued passing as they pulled themselves onto the road, and one of the men narrowly avoided being struck. The final person replaced the cover behind them. Nobody knew who they were or what they had been doing beneath the streets for several hours. Police sent emergency service unit officers into the sewer system to search for anything suspicious. The Department of Environmental Protection also inspected the tunnels and equipment. They found no damage, no dangerous devices, and no immediate threat to the public. The leading theory was that the groups were searching for valuables that had fallen or washed into the sewer system: jewelry, coins, wallets, weapons, or scrap metal. Others suggested they were urban explorers looking for abandoned tunnels and forgotten pieces of New York's underground history. But experienced urban explorers were skeptical. Several said that New York sewers were too dangerous and unpleasant to attract ordinary explorers. The tunnels could contain toxic gases, unstable surfaces, and sudden floods. There was almost no phone signal, meaning anyone injured below ground could be completely cut off. One explorer believed the people on camera looked too organized. They had protective equipment, tools, vehicles waiting for them, and clean clothes prepared for the moment they resurfaced. Whatever they were searching for, they appeared to know exactly where they were going. No arrests were made, and it remained unclear whether the different groups were connected. The cameras had only captured their entrances and exits. What happened during the hours they spent beneath New York City remained hidden underground. One of the men was said to be wearing a purple gown, have whiskers, a long rat-like tail, and go by the name Splinter. Turning 21 is supposed to be a milestone, a celebration. For Joseline Terraza, it was more than just a birthday. It was the beginning of a new chapter. She had come to the United States from Ecuador, hoping for a better future. She worked hard, holding down a job as a hotel housekeeper, and she was also saving up, dreaming of what life could become. And this birthday, it was meant to be special, and she wasn't going to be celebrating it alone. There was someone else in her life, someone she'd known since childhood. He was John Chakaguze Ilbis. They'd gone to school together in Ecuador, they shared a past, and now, years later, they had both ended up in the same country once again, reunited by fate or something else. John wanted to make her birthday special, unforgettable. He travelled from Baltimore to Syracuse, he rented an Airbnb, and he planned a surprise celebration just for her. He picked her up from work that day, waiting for her outside the hotel where she cleaned rooms. He had the gifts ready, a cake, a pair of sneakers, even miniature wine bottles with "I love you" written on them. This seems like a thoughtful gesture, really quite sweet, potentially the perfect birthday surprise. Surveillance cameras captured them walking up to the Airbnb together, phones in hand. And then later that night, the same CCTV captured John giving Joseline a piggyback back out of the property. But what happened in between these two pieces of footage, what this footage actually shows, will make your blood run cold. It's frankly one of the most disturbing things I have seen. Inside the Airbnb, Joseline had every reason to believe she was about to have a great night. The decorations, the cake, the gifts, everything seemed thoughtful, normal. But beneath the surface, something wasn't right. There were no other guests, there was no music, no signs of a real party. The elaborate effort, the rented Airbnb, the expensive trip and gifts was all just for her and nobody else. In fact, it seems that John set this up for an intimate encounter, but at some point that night, the warmth of the evening turned cold. Something snapped. John would in fact throttle his friend, and she would never regain consciousness. If this was somehow an accident, then John never called for help. He never tried to save her. Instead, he began cleaning up. And then, hours later, the security camera showed the piggyback. Joseline, though, was no longer alive. He was carrying her lifeless body in this horrifyingly playful manner. Her head hung limply, her arms dangled at her sides as he walked towards his car. And in what must have been a moment of horror for John, as he made his way towards his vehicle, a police cruiser drove straight past him, but somehow it didn't stop. No one knew what he had done. John had just literally gotten away with murder. It seems that the man didn't panic, he didn't break down. Instead, he drove to Lincoln Park, a quiet wooded area in Syracuse. There, in the middle of the night, he dragged Joseline's body from the car and buried her in a shallow grave. Seemingly, there was no remorse, no hesitation. By the next morning, Joseline's family realized that something was wrong. She wasn't answering her phone. In fact, she seemed to have just disappeared. Panic then set in. Her family reported her missing, but days passed with no answers. For 4 days, in fact, John continued on like nothing had happened. But what he did next proved just how little he cared. Believe me, somehow this case gets even more unbelievable and even more infuriating. Instead of laying low, he ran off to New York City. And once he got there, he took out Joseline's credit cards and he started spending her money. A shopping spree with cash he had stolen from a friend that he had just ended. Most disgustingly of all, he even used her credit cards to buy an OF subscription, an act so grotesque, so devoid of human decency, it sent a chill down the spines of the investigators who later uncovered it. Meanwhile, Joseline's body was still out there, alone in the dirt. 4 days after she was reported missing, with police searching in vain, they finally found her right where John left her, buried in a shallow grave. Dumped, discarded, forgotten. At least that's what John thought and hoped, because the truth was catching up to him fast. He was about to be exposed as the monster that he truly is. Detectives quickly pieced together his movements. Security footage showed him leaving the Airbnb, and they realized it was in fact a lifeless body draped over his shoulders. And then days later, Joseline's family got the news. The evidence in his case was overwhelming. John was arrested in New York City after being assaulted and hospitalized, which is a bizarre twist in an already unexplainable crime. But there was still one massive question left unanswered. Why? In court, frustratingly, John had no explanation. He did admit to ending Joseline. He admitted to disposing of her body. But when it came to why, he had nothing to say. Nothing at all. Instead, he stood before Joseline's grieving family. He watched via video link from Ecuador and he begged for forgiveness. He said via a translator, "I feel really bad and ashamed for this situation that I've caused. I regret everything." But luckily, Judge Ten Limpert saw right through it. He said, "The lack of explanation for your behavior is one of the most concerning aspects of this crime. It's something I'm sure the family will wrestle with for the rest of their lives. They can't understand it, nor can I, nor can the people of this community. 23 years to life. That was a sentence for what he did to his lifelong friend. It wouldn't answer the burning questions of why he did it, but for now, he could harm no more innocent people. The fact that Joseline's birthday and her final day on this earth were one and the same must only add to the pain of those that knew and loved her. A truly shocking and awful case. That CCTV footage will stick with me forever. Thank you so much for watching. I'm uploading daily true crime and dark content here on this channel, so make sure that you're subscribed, hit like on the video, and also drop a comment so you get shown more of my stuff. Please do be careful out there, and I'll see you